I'd like to take a few moments with you to consider a subject that I think could make all the difference in your level of peace that we have experienced as a country, a lot of upheaval. Specifically on the area of hope. Question: what is the commonality between the riots from this past summer and the storming of the Capitol on January 6th? I would say that both groups were trafficking in hope. One group over the summer saw injustice. They saw law keepers turning into law breakers, and they didn't see resolution occurring. So they took authority into their own hands and they were going to strike back. Their desire for justice was right and proper, but their actions were wrong and criminal. Then we look at the Capitol and the storming of it. People wanted to make sure the election wasn't stolen. Stop the steal was the theme. So they took action. They took power into their own hands and they invaded the Capitol, seeking to influence, seeking to get justice for what they perceived as an injustice. Both groups had hope. Both groups had hope in themselves. In other words, they had hope misplaced. And one of the things I think is important as a follower of Jesus Christ is that I see this wrong understanding of hope regularly in the lives of many people. So let's take a few moments and think about where our hope should be so that we have real heaven-centered, God-centered hope, but also we find ourselves active in trying to be change agents in this world. They're not contradictions. We can have an eternal hope, a heavenly oriented hope, and we can have earthly oriented hope. And I think that's where our distinction starts. Let me give you some examples. When it comes to wherever your hope is, that's going to inform the decisions that you make. In other words, where you place your hope will determine the actions that you take in your life. And there are always two components to hope. There's the object of your hope and the expectation of your hope. Always does that go together. There's an object, what you believe you are placing your hope in, and then there's an expectation of what that particular thing will deliver. Two examples. If I put my hope in getting to work on time, and it takes 45 minutes for me to get to work, and I leave my house with only 30 minutes to get to work, I should not have the expectation that I'll be on time. Why? Because the object of my hope is impossible to fulfill. I simply cannot change the physical laws of the universe and get to work and make up 15 minutes of lost time. So in that moment, I dial back my expectation of this earthly hope because I can't fulfill it. That's important. That's an important distinction to remember. So whatever I'm putting my faith in, it's got to be able to deliver. The second aspect of this or example would be, let's say, in my marriage relationship. If I go into my marriage or did go into my marriage thinking that my hope is in my wife to fulfill all my expectations, there's no way she can deliver that. It's impossible. And so if that is my hope, what will be ultimately the result? It'll be frustration and heartache. However, if I put my hope in the object of Jesus Christ, now I can relate to my wife, not on the basis of her worth or any expectation I have of her, but on the basis of what Christ tells me I should be to and for her. I should love her like Christ loved the church. So my focus now, the object in the marriage is not on my wife, but it's on following Jesus Christ. And who gains? My wife. And she does the same. Her hope is not that I'll be the perfect husband. But her hope is, as she relates to me as Christ has related to her, and both of us have that as our focus, we'll have a healthy relationship. Now, I mentioned previously this idea of a heavenly and earthly hope. I think that's really important. I put my hope ultimately in Christ, regardless of the political situation or the civil unrest that we might find ourselves in, meaning that I believe God has a plan, and that plan is moving to completion. And there are things that are going to be involved and ways I'm going to experience that are going to be difficult in my life. But my hope is secure. It's a heavenly hope. But then in my earthly hope, I can hope that the police do the right thing. I can hope that the politicians act in the right way. And I can affect change by voting and by peacefully protesting. And I can really have that earthly hope that charges me up to try to make a difference. But I have to be very, very careful to separate those two, that it doesn't ever lead me, my earthly hope, leading me to breaking the law. Why? Because then my hope is placed in myself. I've got to do something. I go too far. So you see the distinction between my heavenly hope and my earthly hope, relating to the object that I'm placing my hope in will dictate the expectation that I'll have. If you find yourself without peace lately, this is a good time to stop and ask yourself, what am I really hoping in? Am I hoping in a political party or a candidate? Am I hoping in some type of civil action? Am I hoping in whatever? Examine yourself. What is that object? And very often, you can measure your emotions, your expectation to see if that object is correct. Doesn't mean you're inactive as a follower of Jesus. Not at all. It means you take that earthly hope seriously and you get involved. But you never let it eclipse the heavenly hope that we have in Jesus Christ. So we live in two spheres. But it's important that during this time you model this, you think this through, you engage, you ask questions and explore when your heart feels like it's not having peace. And it often relates back to where you've placed your hope in that moment. We see the same dynamic in John chapter 5, where Jesus is having an interaction with the crowds. They had placed their hope in the law of Moses. The object of their hope was the Mosaic law, being good enough, measuring up. By their own efforts, they were going to be righteous before God. And they didn't need Jesus because of that. And Jesus confronts them that they've put their hope in Moses, and Moses will be the one who condemns them. You see, wherever you put your hope, it affects your decisions. Whatever the object of your hope is, affects your expectations. We can function with an earthly hope and get involved and be active in our communities, and that's good and proper. But we never want that to drift into and infringe on our heavenly hope, to affect our worship of the true and living God. We live in two spheres. But as we follow Jesus Christ, as our allegiance is to him, we're able to be effective citizens in this world. So today, I hope this is encouraging to you to help you gain a perspective and secure a peace so that you can spread the fame of God wherever you may be.